A hard rain fell this week here in Grand Rapids. Remember, somewhere around Wednesday? Just keep coming. Of course, it's nothing like what went on just yesterday and the day before down in the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, I got a serious puddle in my basement and I moved everything to one side so it didn't get wet. Yeah, I've got a dehumidifier so my books don't get moldy, but that's nothing like seeing your whole house float away. And I'm beginning to wonder if Louisiana is going to become our little bit of Bangladesh, that land in Asia that seems to be inundated almost annually. It's incomprehensible sometimes, isn't it? And then there's the prosaic reality. I went to my first Grand Rapids high school football game yesterday. My side won. But since my son goes to Central Catholic, I can't claim to have had any direct influence over the event. Or maybe I do. But when you think about it, there have been a fair number of floods this year. Rita, Katrina, there was something, what was the one running up the coast, Ophelia, that was just making more and more mud out of North Carolina. And then there was the tsunami back in December. Oh my gosh. Of course, in the last few weeks, we've heard more than a few of the so-called experts exploiting the failures of the systems to respond and what it means about us, and they talk about how it's like September 11th, but worse or different or whatever. If you were lucky enough, you ran into someone who didn't compare it to September 11th, but to November 1st, 1755. You're not nodding your heads. Okay, I had to do some looking up of this myself. It's the famous Lisbon earthquake. A city of 100,000 people that was obliterated in an earthquake on All Saints' Day in 1755. Leveled, flattened, completely demolished. 100,000 people died. Now, of course, they didn't know it was coming and their houses weren't built to withstand earthquakes, but still. Like our September 11th or Katrina, the quake shook the foundations not only of the system but of the culture there in Europe, undermining quite literally the then commonplace Enlightenment beliefs in an orderly and rational and benevolent universe set in motion by an orderly and rational and benevolent God. When something like that, so arbitrary, can come along and do so much damage in such a hurry, what does that say about the goodness, the reason, the orderliness of anything? You know, cataclysmic events are always earthquakes in a sense, in that they always shake the foundations, at least, of our thoughts. Some are literal, like the asteroid collision that caused the end of the dinosaurs. That shook a few foundations. Then there was the eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia in 1815. You see, I've been doing some research. That was the second largest eruption in modern history. And it caused what some people referred to as the year without a summer in Northern Europe and America, where it snowed in New England in July. Now, that was remarkable, but what's really remarkable is that it so destroyed the crops of Northern and Western Europe, notably in Germany, that it drove people to leave the country because of the hunger, and they ended up in the United States. So yes, an eruption in Indonesia can set off murmurs, rattlings that can affect people around the world. But let's consider a couple of human events. One you may not be thinking about on a day-to-day basis, such as the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in the year, what we call 70 of the Common Era. Had that not happened, Christianity may not exist today in the form, at least, we know it. It was such a cataclysmic moment for the Jewish people, and so destroyed their infrastructure that they were unable to recover from it as an organization. And the Jewish Christians had an opportunity prosper. How about the fall of Constantinople to the Turks in 1453? You didn't know you were going to get a history test today, did you? But that's when the Turks took Constantinople. You know what happened because of that? The roads to the east were closed, all the trade routes. So what happened? The Europeans built ships and went going the other direction. Christopher Columbus went looking for a way west because he couldn't go through Constantinople to get to China anymore. And so the fact that we're sitting here right now is in fact directly traceable to the fall of Constantinople in 1453. And you think what you do doesn't make a difference. But these are the great events. The things that have an effect like an earthquake, whether they're earthquakes or not, have effects like the biblical flood that wash away everything we know, physical or ideological. And when that happens to us in our time, whether it be in Louisiana or New York City or the Pentagon or wherever it happens to be, we are forced to start over again because there's no landscape left for us to hang on to. And that's exactly how the Bible describes it. When we start, the very first words start with this formless, watery beginning. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earths. V'haaretz hayata tohu v'bohu v'choshech el penei tachom. And the earth was unformed and void, and darkness was upon the face of the waters, the deep. That's what it feels like when a flood or an earthquake or a cataclysm comes. Everything's scattered around, formless. It's a kind of a chthonic sea of churning energy. Nothing quite holds together. Power without purpose, what we like to call chaos. You know, most of us, fortunately, saints be praised, do not live through floods or earthquakes or literal volcanoes, even wars. But all of us, each and every one of us, has been overwhelmed by some kind of personal cataclysm, probably more than once. Sometimes it is physical, like a disease or an injury, or like a day at the beach for me about 7 years ago. There I was in the surf along the Delaware shore near Bethany Beach. You probably know where it is. And a hurricane far to the south was churning up the surf, so we had really good breakers coming in. Now, I don't swim out in the ocean, but I love to stand in the surf kind of up to my knees, let the breakers come. And I had a very young son, the same one who's now 14, who was then 7, and he looked a little sheepish about going in the water. So I put him against my hip, you know, with both of us with our bathing suits on, and I slowly walked out into the surf. And the breakers would come up and they'd splash us. He was a little scared, so he'd hold on even tighter, but I knew it was okay. And so I'd face a little bit this way against the water so it wouldn't really hurt too much. And we began to laugh and enjoy ourselves. And the breakers were very exciting because they were kind of tall, and we go up and down and up and down. And we laughed, and then one came along, and suddenly my feet fell out from under me because the waves had taken the sand away. And we were no longer above the water, but underneath of it. And we were wet. And the water was pulling. And suddenly the legs that were around my waist gave way, and I felt him slipping away. And I grabbed him by the wrist, which is the only thing I had of him at that moment. And that's all I could do because the wave was pulling us out into the ocean. But I knew we couldn't go there because I knew what was out there. But yet the sand was not holding on with my hand. And somehow I knew that if I could wait until two of those waves were far enough apart, I could at least get my knees in the sand and I could reel him in